please help me welcome our amazing multi-hyphenate directors extraordinaire, Milena Govich, Lionel Coleman, and David Stassen.
Hey, everybody.
I would love to know how you establish authority, trust, and rapport on day one as an episodic director.
It's a very interesting question because the job of an episodic director is such a bizarre one, because you don't actually, you're coming into a new show, you're meeting everyone for the first time and saying, oh, hi, nice to meet you. By the way, I'm your boss, but I'm new and you've been here all along. So it's a bit complicated in that way. And that is a tough balance. I personally like to start just by asking people lots of questions. What's working, what's not working. And I try to absorb as much information as I can. I don't typically come in and just try to be the boss, because I think that's not a great strategy. It's not setting me up for success. I like to try to get the best I can out of the people who are there every day and working on the show day in and day out. And that's often by getting to know them and activizing their creativity. And that's, I think, where you start to get trust, is not from showing some sort of outward authority, but it's more bringing people in and letting them feel heard and create, and to really empower them. And then that's where I think you start to build a really interesting rapport.
Sorry, I'm trying to listen to it as a episodic director, but I'm listening and participating in this kind of as someone currently running a show, right? Like EPing a show as a writer. So I'm just thinking about, yes, that's the kind of visiting guest director I would want, is someone who sounds collaborative and wants to know how the show operates. I think that it is such a collaborative field. And yeah, if you're on a movie, the director's in charge. But if you're on a TV set, the director's only in charge to a certain point, I think. And to be honest with you, and it's about keeping the train on the tracks. I think, like when you're doing episodic TV, it's fast paced and it's very intense because of the workload that most shows are having to accomplish in such a short amount of time. So coming in, listening to the DP, listening to the writers on set, figuring out, as Milena said, what's working, and then helping the show kind of improve in terms of maybe finding out what's not working, I think are all great things to bring to the show that you're hopefully hired on.
I was going to say, it's going to be interesting to see how David answers that question, because when he's directing, he could do whatever he wants and he's got no real recourse, I'm
known to be a tyrant.
So echoing what everyone else has said, I usually start off with just pure intimidation. That's what helps me. I'm kidding. No, Milena has it dialed in. You're a guest, right? I had a director, and I'll never forget this, in my first time episodic director workshop that the DGA puts you through. I'll never forget this. Michael Misiano said that pretend that you're being invited to the most amazing dinner at this beautiful house that you couldn't even put into words, your surroundings, and your job is that you want to get invited back. And I think as long as you know that, and know that to some extent it is a writer's medium, like David was saying, and we are guests there. It is not our show. Frankly, it's not our episode. Another director once told me, and I live with this every day. He said, if you were to drop dead on day 5 of your episode, that episode is going to still get made. It's going to be really, really good. And fans are going to love it. And if you're lucky, you may get some sort of mention at the very end of the show that you were kind of there for a little bit in memoriam. So I think as long as you keep all of those things in mind, for me, it's humility. I never go on to a show not having watched as many episodes as possible. And when I say as many, I'll try to watch the whole season, 2 seasons, 3. I tried to do that on a show called NCIS, but they'd been on for 20 seasons, so that I failed miserably at that. But when you come on, you have this innate knowledge of people's names that you've seen, whether it's your lead wardrobe, your cinematographer, your editor, and you can recall episodes in which you saw something that you liked, telling your production designer, I love the sets that you guys do every single week. Those really endear you to your crew and to the cast. And I think that really paves the way for success for you. And everyone goes back and they talk to the showrunner. There'll be a little comment here or there. And David likes hearing those when they're positive. He doesn't like hearing them when, there's a negative comment. So humility is, I think, my biggest weapon.
Everyone works so hard in all these shows. And for someone like Lionel said to come in and just acknowledge that you notice the hard work, I think it just goes a long way. I think it's like you said, it does. Word gets around that you're the kind of person people want to be on set with.
Well, and to part of Lauren's question about like, how do you do this on day one? It's very hard. But I think what Lionel is saying, just coming in with humility and acknowledging the work is a great way to start out on day one. That's a really, really good strategy.
What is your process for breaking down an episodic script? What to look for when time and budgets are tight?
I get made fun of in my writer's room for thinking at the line producer all the time. So I'm just looking at stuff being like, oh, if we lost this actor from this scene, then he might be off an extra day, and that might save the production a night in a hotel if he's traveled. Your brain starts going into all these modes of line producer stuff aside. I just look. I also come at the script as a writer. What's a little moment where it's a little line that, oh, you know what? Like that line, just if it had one extra sentence or there's a little retort there that's not in the script, we're going to get that. And, I really can't really get creative too much until I've started walking the sets and scouting. Then I can start to picture a great movement into the scene, or kind of, where the master's gonna be. But God, there's so many different levels to it. I think, those are all ones that I use. And, again, as Milena said, helping the show improve or helping the production. What's something you notice, stuff like that.
Mary Lou Belli and Bethany Rudy had this great book that I always recommend that everybody read who's jumping into this. And in that book, she mentions the first time a director reads the script, it's kind of like your one chance to not think about budgets, right? Blue sky dreaming, I think, is what you can initially do. And I try to read the first pass just like that, just as if I'm a fan of the show. And I'm going on this ride along with everyone else. And it's very difficult because I'm a cinematographer and an editor. So I'm constantly thinking in terms of visuals and transitions and time and such. But that's the first thing that I do. And there's many, many reads, as my co-guests would tell you, that each time you're finding something different, it's like, holy shit, I didn't even realize that this person sees this car that's running down the street. It's like, fuck, I got to get a POV shot of that. So I'm reading this and reading it, but the very second time I read it, usually then it's like breaking down all of the beats and the acts. the different days, the different nights. I always try to indicate day one or night one on my scripts. And I color mine to death. I mean, if you saw mine in scriptation, you'd think that it was like a kid, second grader's homework or something, because they do look very colorful. But I want to be able to look at this in the dark on a set that's not lit and be able to find an exact scene and see the different beats immediately. So I do a lot of those types of things. So that's sort of like my second pass. And then the third pass is usually when I'm a lot more heavily involved in story at that point in time, trying to figure out the subtext behind the text. What are these characters thinking? And somewhere around the fourth or fifth, it's like I start to think about what can I bring to this episode. I did an episode of a show called Tracker that was supposed to be in New Orleans, but of course we're in Vancouver. So that's interesting all in itself. But me having been in New Orleans, having worked there, having grown up, I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm not white. I was able to look at the script in a completely different way. This guy drives into town in his big truck, and now he's going to help this Black father find his son. It's like, I know the writers like to think that the world thinks that way in rural New Orleans, but it doesn't, so I had to figure out, how can I inject these roadblocks that the characters could see and feel, and then discuss this with number one, and tell him, hey, white guys in trucks in the South, there's a history there. So, and that's the beauty, I think, of shows that will allow multiple directors to come in. We all come in with our own baggage, our own points of view, our own places that we've been to and traveled to and seen, and people that we've spoken to. So somewhere around the fifth or the sixth time, I'm putting myself into the story, but doing so in a way that honors the words. I'm not trying to take it in a completely different episode that the showrunner is going to freak out about. But it's sort of, my perspective and point of view. And then, shot listing for me, I try to start pretty early. But as David said, if you're new on a show, you want to see the sets. You also want to sit with your cinematographer and your first AD to figure out what is possible, and they'll always say, well, we'll usually do masters from here. It's like, okay, so if I didn't usually want to do what you usually do, what else could I do that would be interesting? And I like to offer up suggestions and receive them in a collaborative way. And to me, at that point in time in the script, I can kind of start to see the episode coming together, and I can see exactly how I plan to shoot it.
I think we have a very similar approach. I really try to also turn off the line producer in my brain and remind myself that there are plenty of production people on the team who are going to be worried about, do we have, is the scope of work too big for the days we have? Do we need to combine locations? So I try actually not to think about that out of the gate, and really just absorb the story, the characters, the world, take all the prep that I've done of very similar. I always try to watch as many episodes as I can. And sometimes I'll get recommendations ahead of time from either the showrunner or the producer director, and say, what are the episodes that I should really pay attention to in my prep? Because they often have a handful that they're like, these were really, really strong. We want to go more in this direction. And so I get some guidance from the team as early as I can, so that when I do take in that story for the first time, I'm really trying to find the heart. And I direct a lot of big, action procedurals, and, I blow things up on a regular basis. It's super fun. But that's not why people watch the show, right? They want to watch the show because they care, right? They care about the characters. They care about the story. Who are we rooting for? why are we on this journey, and what's going to hold the audience all the way to the very end? So that's really where I start in my process. And maybe that's because I am also an actor. And so that's very organic to me. As far as breaking down the script and that whole process, I also looks like a 4-year-old took crayons to my scriptation. I highlight things in their departments, like props are green, set dressing is tan, costumes are pink. Like, I really do a very detailed breakdown like that because it helps me in all my meetings and all the prep meetings, so that when we're on the props meeting and we're going scene by scene and talking about everything, I want to make sure I've hit everything. And similar to what Lionel said, there's times when I'm going, it's the 14th time I've gone through the script. I'm like, oh, wait, oh my gosh, he sees that. It's very much like what you said. And how did I miss that? Or somebody will ask me a question about it. I'll be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So I try to do those little detailed things so that doesn't happen very often, but it always does. It always does. It's really remarkable. But I think it's because we are imaginative people. And so when I'm reading a script, I'm just automatically visualizing it. And so, sometimes my vision is a little askew from what's actually there. And so it's great to have your whole team to do that. Nuts and bolts, as far as breaking things down and shot listing and all of that. I also am a professional dancer. I started my career on Broadway. So I use overheads because that clicks for me very easily as a dancer. So I look at actors, camera, as choreography. So basically, I make overheads of every single scene. I put in my most of my camera positions, moving shots, and break down my shot list in that way. So I start with the visual and sort of backfill what all the shots are. And so that's sort of in a nutshell. And then very similar for the rest of the process, very similar to what Lionel was talking about, going scouting and leaning on your team for ideas and suggestions. I'll often say, so you guys are in this set all the time. What haven't you done in here? And often there's like some second AD that's like, oh, I had an idea.
Okay.
I've always wanted to see something. And I'm like, great, let's try it. And usually there's a reason why you've never shot it over there. But it's fun to explore. It's fun to explore it if there's a way to make it work and it's interesting and different and still work, and it's still within the story and looks good, then, let's try.
I was with David, but on another show, Elspeth, Robert King. And I said to Robert, how is it different when you're directing? And he said, well, I don't really write anything down. I have an assistant that does that. So that's one difference. But he says, with me, just as you told me that you can shoot your way out of a room, I can write my way out of a room. So I know with David, he has like a different power than the rest of us. It's a superpower that if he, is running short on hours or what have you, he can rework a scene and make his day instantly. Whereas Milena and I will be sweating bullets, hoping that the sun doesn't go down before we turn around and get our coverage looking the other way because the actor can't remember their lines. So he's got ways of doing things that we don't have that toolkit just yet.
Yeah, there's probably also the advantage of the trust that somebody who's on set every episode has with specifically the crew. But I was gonna think of the actors, right? Getting the actor to do something the way you frankly know it has to be in the cut, So, I mean, Lionel, you mentioned you were also an editor. I started off in editing, but pre-ESPN, so just sports highlights. But
What?
Yeah, I know a little bit, but I mean, as an editor, I mean, I find that editors often make great directors because they're thinking in the final piece, in the final product. the funny thing editors editors do, which people shouldn't do, is in a comedy, if an actor ends a scene with a great improv, they might come in, say the editor comes in, the director says, "Oh, cut," and the actor says, "Oh, how was that?" And then it was, "Oh, that was great. I'm not going to use that last part." Like, don't ever tell the actor the funny thing they did is not being used. Just think that was awesome. And in your head, because the editors are thinking they're cutting it already in their head. But are you cutting a lot in your head, Lionel? Your director's cut?
Definitely. And putting together sequences, once again, it's my superpower. You've cut before, so we also have, I see another editor on our Zoom here, Oscar, who comes from the Dick Wolf world of editing, and he was shadowing me and giving me editorial advice. So it was kind of this weird dynamic of dueling editors being there. But yes, knowing when you have it, and like David said, actors are a completely different animal to an episodic director. You can have the best blocking overhead plan possible, as Milena would tell you, and now you're sitting there with number one who says, "Oh, I really feel like I would start here."
Yeah.
And I don't want to stand up for this. I'd rather sit down because it's a pensive moment, and I don't know if I'm going to break up with my husband, and I have a person in interrogation that I'm dealing with. So there's all kinds of variables that we face, but yes, it all comes down to something that Karen Gaviola told me a long time ago, one of our great directors of the DGA. She says, "Prep the shit out of it." That was before I did my first episode, and I don't think that you can be prepared enough.
100%. It's actually very similar to what actors do, which is you know the dialogue, the scene cold, so that you can throw out all your homework and just be present and respond in the moment. And I do that as a director constantly. And I feel the freedom to do that because when I've prepared so thoroughly, if the actor comes in and goes, "Well, no, I want to enter from over there instead of there," I just go, "Okay," and just flip flop the whole scene, flip flop all the blocking, flip flop all the cameras. But I'm comfortable doing that because I know in my bones what the scene is and what I need from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you have more creativity that way, and because you're open to what's happening in front of you, and something might be great. They may come in with an idea, or the DP may be like, "Well, actually, what if we do this instead?" And you go, "Oh, that's even better." And you can take advantage of those moments rather than, if you're not prepared. This is how I feel. Like, I would be scared. If I wasn't fully prepared, I would be scared to start taking those risks because there's a lot of dominoes that fall when you start changing things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the most important meetings, I think, for a director is your tone meeting that happens in the prep. I take voracious notes during those times. And like Milena was saying, when an actor decides, "Oh, I don't want to come in from that direction, I want to come in from over there," all of that stuff is just staging and blocking. And if it does not affect your day or make the lighting a complete nightmare, something that's going to add more time, I do it because I can look at my tone notes and see, okay, in scene 8, it's just really important that we understand that there's something going on in her private life that's preventing her from executing her job properly. And she knows that. And more importantly, your partner knows that. So as long as that's satisfied, I mean, if you want to come in with a trapeze, that's fine. But as long as the tone of that scene is exactly what the writers and showrunners want, then yes, once again, it goes back to the prep. You can alter and change as much as you want because you leave there prepared because you know exactly what the scene is supposed to convey.
Yeah. Do you guys find that when I have time, I like to have sort of a dynamic idea for the scene and then a more static idea for the scene. And depending on the DP, the actors, like my fellow writers on set, how the rehearsal goes. Do you guys always have two plans going in or more than two? Or do you have your plan, then you just know from your experience, well, we can just adjust?
If it's a dialogue driven scene, probably not. I would probably just have my idea for the staging, but be absolutely open to whatever's going on, and then work in the moment to shape it. If it's got a lot more elements and there's action, or there's a stunt, or there's a lot of movement, or I for sure have plan A, B, C, D. 100% have backup plans. And a lot of those plans have less to do with like what the actors want to do or not. Well, sometimes if it's a stunt, it's like, well, how much of the stunt do they want to do? When do we do a cowboy switch or whatever? We can do it in a couple of different places. A lot of it's about making the day, like what are the shots I can drop that if we're running into trouble or it's taking too long to set up and I'm going to lose the light or whatever it is, having those sort of backup plans. So I guess my backup plans tend to be more logistical than creative. Because when you're in a more contained environment, it's easier to just, let's try this, let's just. But when there's just so many elements, if we're going to pivot, I want to know exactly where we're pivoting and all the dominoes. Again, the dominoes that could fall with that. I want to be on top of those.
I always, once again, and I hate this, I cannot turn off the cinematographer portion of me. So I'm always thinking high dynamic in every single scene. Mm-hmm. If it is two people that are sitting and talking and, it's 3 or 4 pages, I'm looking inside of the words to see when does that conversation shift, because they all will shift somewhere. So I think, and I'll tell the DP, hey, I see you're keying from this one direction here, but I plan on jumping the line. So they will go, oh, so we're going to shoot this whole scene from opposite sides. And I said, well, if we have time, that would be great. I want to start on the right side and then I want to jump to the left later. And I want to get a 50-50 angle on both of those as well. But if we're running short on time, then we'll just go back and cover the last half of this from this opposite side. And once again, for me, I hate sitting in editing going, oh my God, I'm falling asleep here because I didn't cover this the way I could have done it. I didn't put forth the time and effort to think, man, I know that we have 2 crane days. I should have just asked the line producer if I could just have one more because I want to bring the techno crane through the window here. So I'm always thinking that way. I will usually get some and fail miserably at others, but I never put a governor on myself whatsoever. I'm always trying to think about the longevity of the show. And I tell people this all the time. Me as an episodic director, I feel as if I'm running like the 1500 4x, or if there is such a thing, or 4x400. And I'm just standing there waiting for Milena to give me the baton, and I'm going to run my ass off to get to the next person to give them the baton, because that's what we're all trying to do here at the end of the day, is continue working and working with people that we really like working with. So to do that, I have to be thinking all the time, max dynamic. And if I have to pivot from there, it's like, oh man, you kind of screwed yourself before lunch. This next scene, it's 4 pages and we got to hammer through it. Then I'll just change my blocking and try to keep everybody on the same side so that my looks are all at least not going crazy if I have a large portion of dialogue. But yes, I always go dynamic first. And my plan B is to simplify within that dynamic nature of it. But I do challenge everyone. We're not going to just kind of walk through our day here. We're going to go for it.
I feel like an overarching theme here is organization and preparation. That seems to be the number one thing that's a through line. And Lionel, when you were talking about picking up, as you're on set or in your prep, you mentioned the car and thinking, okay, I have to pick up the POV from the car. I'm curious how the three of you deal with your number ones on the call sheet, as well as your guest actors, to sort of wind them up, but also allow them to bring their creativity and sort of finding that balance between, like you mentioned, we have to get this in the shot because it leads to X, Y, and Z, versus an actor who is a little bit more creative than that maybe that particular scene allows, or there is the flexibility for that creativity.
I've heard number ones come in and say that, we're coming from another episode. Half of our brains are still in that previous episode. When we come into this episode, we want a director that knows exactly what they want. They don't want to see you trying to figure it out on the day. And there's a director that I am pretty good friends with, a guy named Michael Zinberg. And he said, yeah, I used to shot list, but I don't do that anymore. He says, I'll watch the rehearsal and, have a loose plan. And then, we'll kind of put all the shots together at that point in time. And he's good at it. I mean, people love him. They hire him. He's, works whenever he wants. I just can't do it that way. I really do think that number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the background folks, they all want to see that you have a point of view. And in that point of view, then you can play. The number ones that I've worked with, wherever you are in the season, there's fatigue there, and to fight that fatigue, they really want to come in and see someone at the helm sitting in that chair that has a point of view. They've thought about it. They're open to collaborating if need be. But once again, you have to come in being uber prepared and know the stuff when you need them and when you don't need them.
It's such a difficult job. I think what even like Lionel's like touching on about like the number one, like the episodic director is a guest and they're in charge, as we said earlier. And so you have to come in. It's tough. You have to come in with a plan that you're confident in, that everyone's going to respond to, but that also everyone everyone knows the show better than you. And they have to also be like, yeah, that feels right, but also we're excited by it. So that means it's creative and it's different, but it still feels the same. It is such a hard thing to do. And it's a tough job just being the journeyman director. And so, yeah, I hopefully, every crew is always kind to the people visiting. But yeah, I've seen directors come in with a plan that's crazy, and it can take a scene or two or a day or two for the crew to kind of recover from like that wild blocking idea that the DP or the showrunner kind of shot down. But it's you have to get people on board fast and be in charge, but also it's their show. It's a complicated task. One
of the strategies that I use, I hate calling it a strategy because I as an actor myself, I've done that job. I know what it feels like to be on set in episode 18 out of 22. So I think I have a shorthand with actors in a lot of ways because they know that I've gone through what they're going through and I've lived it. And so that's good. That's good. But one thing I do when I'm starting any episode is I email all the actors ahead of time. But the regular cast and every guest cast, from our big guest stars down to our co-stars, down to our stunt doubles sometimes. And I just say, "Hey, I'm Elena. I'm the director. Congratulations on booking the episode. You did a great audition," or whatever. Or, "Hey, I've loved your work. I especially the episode you did that was about this was so great and cool. I can't wait to meet you." When you've had a chance to read the full script, because, the actors are processing, they're in the middle of shooting another episode when they get the script. And so some of them will read it ahead of time. Some of them won't even look at it till the night before we start shooting. I'm open if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, you want to chat, I'm available. So I just open myself up. And this is, 4 or 5 days before we start shooting. And that has paid dividends in so many ways, just starting that dialogue. Most often it's like, "Great, no questions, can't wait to meet you," whatever. But sometimes things do come up. And then I can get ahead of it and I can start a conversation with the actor, and maybe I need to loop in the writer and so it's not like, "Oh, we come to set, we're reading the words," and number one goes, because as a director, you're like, oh God, where is this going? What is this going to turn into? But when you do that, they feel more seen, heard. They feel more creative. I have a jump on what the situation is going to be, and maybe there's like an easy solve, and it's something we can do in the writing that doesn't affect all kinds of other stuff. But had we waited to address it in the moment, it may have been a much bigger issue. And then, I think just starting off that way gives a sense of trust, because I've also had actors say to me, young ones that are not very experienced, to be like, "Well, I came to say I didn't even know which one the director was," because, maybe the AD is saying, "Oh, you're over there," and they're so confused, and they're shot out of a cannon, all your guest actors. I describe it to people like, our show is a hamster wheel that's going, right? And everybody is sprinting on this hand, and here comes this guest actor, and they got to be like, and there's so much going on, and then you're expecting them to deliver all this dialogue and cry on cue, and like, oh my gosh. So the more you can sort of usher them into the process so they don't feel quite a shot out of a cannon, just the better off everybody's going to be.
Melina, you're spot on once again in that first time episodic workshop that the Directors Guild puts us through. Bethany Rooney was one of the directors, and she said the same thing. She always reaches out to all the actors and, says hi. And if you have any questions, let's talk. I've kind of taken that to my own little level, because I have guest actors who come on and they're nervous, not really sure, they're joining this locomotive that's already in motion quickly. And so what I do with all of my actors, and Oscar can attest to this, I call them and we talk backstory. Certainly your character came from somewhere. And oftentimes I do get some tips from the writer or the showrunner, but there's a lot of times in which we find the character's backstory together. I always have ideas, but I never try to just throw them on to the actor. It's, sometimes simple as, where you're from, what your last job was before this, what made you quit, what made you do this thing that, people are looking at you for and wanting to arrest you for. How many kids do you have? All of those things. And I think that they matter. I mean, all of my actors that I work with, none of them can ever say that they come to work unprepared. They have a place that they can ground their performance in. And I think otherwise, they're kind of reaching for things and just sort of reading the words. But if your family makeup, your socioeconomic status, where you're from, what kind of car you drive, what what you were doing before this job that caused you to quit that job, all kinds of things that kind of relate to character. Oh my goodness, your performance is just like amazing after that, I found.
Goes back to what Milena was saying from the first question, trust, right? You're building that trust to be able to collaborate and that net. So just for the sake of time, we're going to move on to open Q&A from our attending membership.
Hi, everybody. And thank you all so much for organizing this and doing this today. I'm just curious about how you go about finding your next projects and who you like to collaborate with, and just a little bit about your process of that.
For me, there's a saying, the best time to find your new job is while you're still working on your current job. So, so much of that applies, I think, to our daily life. I know when I was working on Elsbeth, I loved my episode so much, and I loved working for Michelle and Robert King, that it was imperative for me to really crush my episode, because when you do that, that's what leads to your next project. And like, I'm not in a position right now where my phone is ringing off the hook and I'm having to turn things down. It's not to say that I'm like such a desperado that, I take anything that comes, but I'm a big fan of television and I'm constantly watching shows. So for me, I'm doing a lot of my own research. I'll watch a show and go, man, I really, really like that show. Who do I know? Man, I know no one. Do I know an executive who's covering that show? Oh, let me reach out to that person. So there's steps, I think, that you're trying to kind of figure out. But, and then for me, there's passion projects. Like, I still like to do documentaries. I still work in the television commercial world. So I'm always looking for projects there that I could really fail miserably at, because someone said if you're super nervous and frightened beyond belief, that's when you know that you're growing. So those are, I guess, are the projects that I'm looking for. But I'm always in a constant state of trying to figure out ways to connect with people that I want to work with. And, by happenstance today, I'm with the writing showrunner of a show that I've been trying to work on. So you can bet that my recruiting is going to start with him as soon as this Zoom ends.
It's it's the grand hustle. We are gig workers. Just because you book one show, it can have no bearing on whether you ever work again. That said, I think Lionel's approach is very much like mine, which is that I utilize my network of people, because that's really how you get work in our industry is by connecting with people, by doing good work, because word gets around, and if I have been in the position before where I have hired directors, and the first thing I do is call people. I look at their resume and see who they've worked with, anybody that I know, or, could be introduced to a friend of a friend kind of thing. And I call up, oh, how was Lionel? How was Lionel on the set? How was he with the actors? Was he prepared? How did the episode turn out? Great. And so that reputation is really, really important. And it can really benefit you. I've benefited from having people recommend me for jobs. And, sometimes I don't even know about it. And maybe it didn't come through, but I've had producer directors be like, oh, yeah, I recommended you for the show on this other network because they were asking me about, young female directors that are up and coming or whatever. And so that's really how a lot of it happens. And so it sounds so gross sometimes, but like cultivating your network it's really important.
Yeah, I just echo what they said. It's so much about being in LA, being in town, building up your Rolodex is a thing that existed when I was a kid. And yeah, just knowing people. And as Lionel said, like, oh, I love this show. Do I know any of the showrunners? No. Do I know an actor? Do I know a friend of a friend on the show? And then, meeting and doing stuff like this, having groups you belong to and learning and making connections.
Someone once told me, Noreen, and I have never forgotten this, your network equals your net worth.
Okay.
And I've never forgotten that.
Karen, what's your question?
Thank you so much. This is an amazing session. I wanted to ask if each of you had any pivotal advice or a pivotal experience in your career that sort of changed the trajectory of what you thought was possible or where you were headed.
When I feel terrified of something, I know that's exactly where I got to go. And it's scary, but it's also where you grow and you discover and you challenge yourself. And I'm in my third career here. So I've done that a couple of times, starting on Broadway, and I was understudying all these celebrities and in shows, but I wanted the role myself. And so my husband said, there's a through line here, you'll see. My husband said, you should learn to act on camera so you can go be in TV and film and come back to Broadway, do the roles you want to do, because they're hiring famous people. And I was terrified, but I did it. And it worked out great. I actually never went back to Broadway. I just had a television career, which was awesome. And then I found myself on a TV set. I'd been on a series, and I found that every day I was spending half my energy trying to keep my mouth shut. And my husband said, you're a director. And I'm like, what? In a 15-year television career, I could count on one hand the women who had directed me. So it was not really, I hadn't internalized that was even a thing. And he was like, that's what you are. And I'm like, what? Like, oh, maybe. Yeah. So I started exploring that. And again, I was terrified, but I went that way. And so, yeah, I guess my two pieces of advice would be run towards your fear and marry the right person.
Yeah.
And David, you mentioned editor on SportsCenter. Now he's running the point, so to speak. There had to be some pivotal.
Well, I mean, to me, I feel like, I remember someone talking about some actress who was an overnight sensation. But it was like, well, no one's an overnight sensation. Like they'd failed a million times before they became famous. And I feel like for me, it was baby steps. And on the Mindy project, I was just a writer. And then back then, or still, the episode I wrote, I was on set for, and I became the set writer after that episode. So then I was on set for the entire run of the show.
Wow.
Michael Spiller was our producing director. He's an incredible director. He's a great human being. He's very.
I love Michael.
Yes, so he's a mentor of mine. He said to me at some point, season 1 or 2, and this was when I would come up to him while he was directing, and I would say, "Oh, it'd be funny if Danny said this in the next take," and he'd be like, "That's great. The camera's in the back of his head right now. So when we turn around, we'll get that." Like, he was so kind to me. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I directed season 3. It was probably my 55th episode of TV being on set. And I was like, God, this took long enough. They should have let me direct sooner. And then I was directing for the first time, 55 episodes in, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So, then each time I directed, I just learned a little bit more. So I feel like it's always baby steps. Having a mentor like Michael Spiller was very important. And then it just built. And I was going to say, when I did this last season of Running Point and I had to direct the last 2 episodes, it was basketball heavy. We had to fake an arena on a soundstage, and we had to problem solve. And there was a lot of VFX, and I was directing 8 cameras at once. And I was, coming from just being an episodic guy, it's kind of just master cross coverage. And now I was directing choreographed basketball, And I came out of it being like, oh, like I'd always been intimidated by VFX and high budget, action videos. I was like, oh, anything is possible. Like if you work with people and you ask questions and you plan and you problem solve, anyone can do anything. So just say yes, right? Like don't be afraid.
And Jessica, I yield to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here and give helpful nuggets. My question is, I know a couple of y'all mentioned shadow directing. How did you guys go about getting that opportunity? Did you touch base with people? And is it essential to shadow direct before you jump into something like episodic TV?
I'm going to point to Oscar here because he is one of the recent graduates of the CBS Diversity Director program. And that to me, any of the network studio programs that you can jump into, those are amazing. That's how I got my start. It's something that I still believe in to this day and try to foster that sense of community. But when you get into a program like that and you're shadowing, you are officially there in an official capacity as a shadowing director. Like if I just say, hey, Jessica, you want to come and watch me work sometime? Then you're there as like my buddy, and you're viewed differently, by the crew. But if you're there as part of an official studio or network program, it's much, much different. And yes, I highly recommend those.
And I would say the shadowing is crucial. It's crucial because you can't, there's no class or book or program that's going to really teach you how to direct. It's a full contact sport, So
No doubt.
the more hours you can spend on set in whatever capacity you can get on set is really, really important. The programs are the best way to shadow because I agree 100% with everything Lionel said. You're not only there just on set, but you're in the prep process, which is sometimes even more essential than being on set because you get the ins and outs of that process. I did not go through a program, but I managed to shadow 20 different directors. I utilized my contacts from my acting career, directors that I knew, showrunners that I knew, DPs could get me on set. And a line producer had me shadow on his show. So it's utilizing your network. It's really tough. I'm going to be so honest with you because I tried during COVID, it was impossible to get shadows. I've tried to bring shadows with me on every episode I do because I feel it's really important to give back to the generosity that was given to me. But many shows don't want an unofficial shadow, even if it's the director's request. And there's a million reasons for that. So if somebody says no to you, you can't take it personally that, oh, I'm not good enough. It's just really, really hard to get the permissions because you have to get them all the way up the food chain. From the director that's willing to let you shadow to the producers, to the writers, to the showrunner, to the studio, to the network. Sometimes if you've got a difficult number one, they can put a kibosh on a shadow. So if you can get the opportunity, seize it. I also tell a lot of people, if you just can't find a way to get on set, do background work. Go sign up to be an extra and just get there and keep your eyes and ears open. You won't be able to hear and see everything that you would want to, but it's a great way to just be present, be part of the process, and keep your spidey sense out and see whatever you can learn.
Well, last thing I'll say, having skills, it made me think of this very funny story I heard. I don't know if it's true, but Michael Mann was directing Miami Vice back in the 80s, and he was really stressed out. They were losing light. It was the end of the day. They had a whole scene to get, and he's at Crafty pounding coffee, and the Crafty says to him, "You okay?" And he's like, "No, I'm not going to get this last scene. The studio's breathing down my neck. I'm so stressed out." And Crafty guy goes, "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to lay down 50 feet of track. You're going to do a dolly. You're going to pull down so you can cut away, and you're going to shoot it. It's going to be sunset. It's going to be beautiful." And Michael Mann's like, "How the hell do you know how to do that?" He's like, I used to be a TV director. It was too fucking stressful. And I got in the craft. Yeah. So, I mean, anyway, the crafty guy knew what to do. He'd spend time on set. So just as they said, get on set.
Well, thank you to our esteemed guests. This has been amazing. It sounds like for everybody. I don't know if the three of you have had a chance to look at the chat, but lots of good takeaways. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for our audience for being here.
Yay.
Without you, there's no panel.